Thanks everybody for joining us today. Today we are going to talk about our roots. So at WyldFlower, these are some things that we focus on. I'll just refresh everyone's memory. If you have been with us before, and if you haven't, you're new here, welcome. WyldFlower Learning Community is a non-traditional private school. We serve students K through 12th grade. We're located in Sheridan, Wyoming. We have a foundation of self-governance, which we'll get into what that means. And also, we're a self-directed learning environment. So we value creative thinkers and curious go-getters. We also deeply value democracy and civic participation. So by creating a space where democracy really flourishes, wonder grows unhindered, and independence blossoms, we see that children's natural response is to thrive, to reach, and to grow. So what we know about people, like our foundational belief, our truth in WyldFlower, is that humans are wired to develop knowledge, skills, and intelligence. So they consistently find unique ways of being and doing when they're immersed in opportunities and challenges of the real world in a scaled down version. We see that children naturally develop into informed, active participants in a committed community, and they make the world a better place to be in. And we're looking for that to last throughout their lifetime and to grow into healthy, happy, flourishing adults. At WyldFlower, life is the curriculum. So there's not a set of standards, there's not a set rubric, there's not lesson plans involved with all of those things that we follow a really strict regiment. So life is the curriculum. We say that all the time. So each child, each learner is on their own journey. So oftentimes we get the question of, well, then how do you do the school part, right? Like if every member of the community is free to pursue their own interests, then how do you know if they're learning? And we get questions about tracking and those kinds of things. It's like maybe there's something happening on the back end. And this is kind of where roots come into play. So they're the foundation of WyldFlower. They're like our core beliefs, our deep down into the soil, which we'll talk about. And while we don't grade and we don't test, we do stay in conversation, and everything happens through relationships. So we're checking in all the time. And honestly, they're checking in with us just as often, just to see how things are going. And we want to make sure that everybody is getting the support that they need in our learning environment. And this means that staff stay very agile and are constantly attuned to this space.
So let's talk about our roots. When we look at our roots at WyldFlower, there are three main components. That is self-development, civic engagement, and environmental awareness. Self-development has to do with the child going through a process of personal development that includes intellectual, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual growth. And we, instead of siloing those things out, we want to integrate all of those things together so that they tie in and complement each other. At WyldFlower, we focus on a few things that are different than traditional schooling. And the reason is because the world has changed a lot. In terms of intellectual development, we're really focused on kids pursuing interests, finding out their passions of what they really enjoy. And as Dr. Gina Riley points out, approach education with first a general perspective, where kids are getting a lot of exposure into different things that they might be interested in. And then once they find that passion, once they find that interest, then the specifics of that, the real fine skills that pertain to that area, unfold afterwards. So it's really a flip, right? Education for a long time has been, you know what, let's pound these skill sets into the kids, from math to English to science to social studies, history, civics. And then through that, understanding the details of these different areas, they'll be ready to go. Our view is really, let's focus on what the kid is interested in generally.
Okay, so when we're talking about cognitive or intellectual development, what we want to see is an environment that's very interesting with adults and other members of the community that are also very interesting. And then we see that intellectual and socially stimulating environment causes people to develop cognitive and intellectually. Alison Gopnik has some really great research on this particularly, and she points out after decades of her doing her research that children are hardwired to learn. And there's lots of other psychologists and scientists out there studying this very same thing that would agree with that. So Gopnik has documented that children and, growing into humans become resilient, confident, knowledgeable, and skilled when they get to participate in an environment where the adults are more like gardeners and less like carpenters, which we talk about a lot at WyldFlower.
Reading, writing, arithmetic, all of those things will come in time. If you have an individual who is mentally healthy, engaged in a community, knows how to work towards self-efficacy, has been empowered because they've been respected and their autonomy has been prioritized so that they can function as an individual, everything else will unfold in time. It's the real belief that, as Ellen mentioned in her opening, kids are built to learn the basic skills needed to be successful in society. We find ourselves is in a society that's shifting really quickly, right? So we're really focused on handwriting in a traditional setting, where in WyldFlower, we realize, yes, that's a skill that can be useful. But the world's changing to where, how often do we handwrite anymore? How often do we need to fill out things in cursive? Everything's becoming tech-based. There's challenges with that in itself, right? Mental health. How do we manage this stuff? How do we not become addicted? So we're really focused on that aspect. How do we manage these new technologies? How do I keep in touch with my own inner world, my mental health, what's going right, what's going wrong, what habits do I need to create? That's our real focus when we look at self-development. Again, all of those other things will unfold and happen in time. When you take kids out of a traditional setting, which is coercive, right, where they need to be here, 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 here at grade level, and you create an open space where they could learn that later on if they need to. And it's not a prerequisite to be successful at this next level of what we're going to force onto you. The learning happens at any time. And that's just been documented multiple times over and over. People like Peter Gray, Dr. Gina Riley, Dr. Naomi Fisher, there's many others. So we feel like at WyldFlower, we're ready for the emergence of the new world we're going into. The data reflects that, and we're comfortable with that situation. So what do we need kids to be if we look at that intellectual side of it? They need to be adaptive, flexible, and know how to acquire information when they need to, and how to learn the skill sets needed when they need to. More on that when we get into the soil.
And so when we're looking for physical development, we're just talking healthy bodies, healthy minds, healthy choices. We talk about what are we putting into our body? What does our sleep schedules look like, especially with those older teens? How can I manage a circadian rhythm that's changing? Again, lots of this happens through conversations. So really a lot of the learning and the experience is just checked in on through relationships.
We want kids to develop these physical attributes where they're healthy, right? They're getting enough movement, they're getting enough exercise, they're learning about their bodies, they're learning about how they can be healthy physically in those ways. That comes with giving an open space where they have plenty of time to play. If you allow kids to play freely amongst each other, they will get a lot of physical activity in during the day. We see a lot of games organized that have to do with physical exertion and skill sets and learning those components, whether it be sports or simple tag games, or kids who are interested in nature, who like to walk, hike, be outside. All of those ways are mechanisms in which kids grow healthily. Another aspect is social development, right? How are kids learning to socialize with others? How are kids learning to regulate their own emotions? How are kids learning to problem solve and reach goals within a group, within a team?
And the social emotional portion, We want to see self-awareness increasing, kids becoming more empathetic than they might have been before. And we just really create a space where compassion is the practice. So it's in our restorative justice, it's in the way that we relate to one another, it's how we use our tone with each other. Those are things that we're in this space constantly touching on, modeling, and just checking in with kids.
When we look at the component of social development, WyldFlower Learning Community flourishes in this realm. Think about it. Your schooling probably had a lot to do with listening to the teacher and not talking in class. You had a moment to socialize at recess, which is limited. Lunchtime, another limited area. Sports and clubs, right? Extracurriculars, which are all good, but they're limiting. A majority of a child's life in a traditional school setting is not social. It's actually a situation where they're conforming, and they actually get in trouble when they try to socialize. At WyldFlower, kids are interacting and having to read each other and having to negotiate throughout the day, nonstop. That is the best way to get anyone, any individual, kids or adults, to learn the appropriate social skills they need to collaborate with others within our community. Because we're not constrained by curriculum and assessment, it allows us to have plenty of time and plenty of space throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the year, where kids can practice emotional regulation and those things. Another thing that supports that is the autonomy that we give kids. It is clear that play is an ultimate way to learn social and emotional skills. At WyldFlower, kids have the school meeting, which is a community of students and staff, runs the school. Right? So within these contexts, we have impulses and wants of our own, but we realize quickly in a context of something like WyldFlower that we have to regulate those things. We have to control those things. And practice allows you to start developing that. So rather than the abstract of going to a health class, which I used to be an instructor in, having a curriculum where we're going to talk about these different components of empathy and compassion, and confidence, and how do we understand our emotions and those things. At WyldFlower, we actually get to live those things first and then have conversations about them in the moment or after if needed. And that's where a lot of the understanding of how my mind as an individual works is happening, right? So it can be confusing as a child. And our role as a staff member is to help them make sense of some of those things that are going on. And we do it in a restorative way, right? Our disciplinary approach is very strength-based, where we're looking more of how do we fix something that we might have caused because of our actions, and less on who's to blame and what punishment needs to come out through this.
The spiritual component of development, we just really want to allow children to reflect on their own actions, their own choices, their own beliefs, and give them the opportunity to just deepen in those areas. So it's a very personal process. It's a very individualized process. No one is telling someone else how to be or what to do in that realm. It's just a respecting of each other's differences and allowing that time and space for those things to develop.
At WyldFlower, we are non-denominational, but we at the same time understand the value of having a strong and rich spiritual life. In our community, this varies. We have kids who are Christians, Buddhists, even atheists, and they learn how to interact with all those different worldviews, respect each other's worldviews to the degree in which we can collaborate as a society, and at the same time disagree with those worldviews and have debate in a way that's actually enlightening to a degree. You can learn about others, you can learn about your own practice, because we all have questions about that realm, right? And whatever approach we're taking, to fill that spiritual need humans have, there's always room for growth there. So in a space where children learn to respect the diversity of different belief systems people have, while at the same time understanding these belief systems have to come together at a certain point and share values of freedom, democracy, independence, you have an environment where we're setting kids up to be successful in the world we're in. That is the final component of self-development. And all of those things together create a holistic approach that allows that child to grow.
When we look at personal growth, this is really that developmental, that psychological research, physically, emotionally, intellectually, all of the things kind of come into this, just really respecting the unique amount of time and the unique amount of space that each person is going to need to really become the fullest version of themselves. So we really protect that space and time for each of our community members. And there's a quote by Tim Elmore that I really love that says, "Prepare your child for the path instead of the path for the child." So in that, prepare your child, not from a carpenter perspective, but from a gardening perspective, where we provide this space and we hold this community together, and we've provided that structure on the outside, but really on the inside of that, you really allow a child to become who they are meant to be, without all that external pressure or tons of advice or lots of coercion or us deciding for them what that should look like. Just providing the right environment, the right amount of time, the right amount of nutrients, the right amount of support, and then really standing back and watching that child become themselves, and not owning any of that, not becoming tied to any of those outcomes, just really celebrating the child for developing and growing into themselves. And it's a really beautiful process to watch. So we know that students need support and they need experience to gain a deep understanding of their own unique strengths and their own unique struggles. So really preparing that student for the path is not dictating to the child what the path should be, but just watching and cheering them on as they go through that process of making meaningful decisions about those things. So we really want to cultivate an environment that challenges the individual to get to know themselves better and to improve themselves mentally, physically, socially, so that they can develop the resiliency it's going to take to conquer fears and overcome obstacles that normal life is just going to throw at us. So the childhood, that it's a journey. It's this beautiful destination in and of itself that we don't want to constantly just be waiting for them to become an adult. We really want to celebrate where they are right then and there, and that's enough. But we do know that childhood is this journey towards independence. And so we just want to watch them thrive and explore and take risks and do all of those really amazing, wonderful things that we see at WyldFlower all the time. And our job as staff is to just try to keep up and give time and space, and allow them to engage with the materials and the choices and the activities and the adventures that they choose to do. And through that process, we just really know they're going to develop mastery over the knowledge or the skills. They just do it with such incredible accuracy and efficacy. So we don't need to add more to their plate, and we don't need to take away. They're completely capable of handling all of those things. Again, we're just the guide on the side, and we're supporting that whole process. Which brings us to the next route, I think, which is civic engagement.
Civic engagement at WyldFlower is really like project-based learning, in the sense that they are creating a democracy and a community day to day. They're totally immersed in it. It's not abstract, this thing that we talk about Supreme Court leaders or presidents that used to do it, right? They're involved in that process of actually creating it. And then through that, you start to look at history and different governments and countries and societies and how they were organized, and you learn about those individuals, and it's really interesting. But by flipping it, again, based a lot on like what Dr. Gina Riley talks about, let's go general first in a sense of experience this whole component that we're looking at of civic engagement. They, depending on the individual, they might go more specific within all of that. There's there's research, and it makes total sense, that supports the idea that kids who are in a space where they get to practice civic engagement early on actually participate in that later on as an adult as well. Living it and then doing it later on is really what you see through this.
At WyldFlower, part of the structure of our government, we have a thing called WJC, which is our Justice or Judicial Committee. And then our principal is a meeting of all members are invited once a week, and that's called school meeting. And so that's the mechanism for laws being established or amended. We also have a meeting that happens twice a week with just a select few. They've been elected into these positions, and we call that ticket tribunal, mostly because the kids didn't like the word jury duty. So our kids in our community and our staff write a ticket if somebody is knowingly breaking a law, and maybe we've had a conversation and it's just not resolving it. They'll write a ticket, and then that gets processed 2 different times a week. And so that's what we call ticket tribunal. So we're going to do a whole video just on those components. So we'll keep it really brief here and just let you know we're self-governing. We make the rules together. There's no one entity that is more involved in that than the other. Everybody's voice is welcomed. Everybody's vote is important. We hold elections twice a year, and those are student-led and student-directed, and staff fill in if we need to. But so far, the kids are filling those positions and doing really great. There's managers of various spaces within our school building, and so there's kids handling all of those responsibilities. So we'll do a more in-depth dive into that. So make sure that you like and subscribe here and turn on notifications so that you don't miss that.
School community, we have an environment that we're trying to foster good, kind, engaged individuals. But there's also the component of the world we live in. And so one thing we focus on at WyldFlower is giving plenty of opportunities for kids to get out into nature, into the wild, and gain an appreciation for the environment that they live in. Again, everything we're doing is intentional.
At WyldFlower, to build this environmental awareness, we really firmly believe that there has to be free, open time spent in nature. We're not just on a path to go do a trash cleanup, although that might happen because the kid might notice that. We're not just going to the pond to count the number of fish that are within there, but again, those things might start to happen if a child gets interested in it. But first, our first approach is to just, again, keep it very broad and very open and let those more finite topics come up later. So it's just to be in nature. And that's, what do you want to do while we're there? That's up to you. So are you going to build a fort, or are you going to have a battle, or are you going to whittle a stick, or whatever those things are? That's enough. And that's good use of your time. So making meaningful decisions, even when we're out in nature, is also important, because the more time they spend in that space, the more relationship they will build within that space too. So by observing trees and being in the trees, being where the mountains are, being where the wildlife is, they develop a relationship to it. And I think, yeah, making sure that we understand our impact within that environment is really important. And it's neat to see them start to notice those things. What's a human impact on a space, and what's a natural impact on a space, and making sure that we're aware of how we could shift the balance. And again, it comes through relationship, conversations, and interest-based inquiry. So it's very, it's a very cool component of our program at WyldFlower. And again, it just really honors the child's independence and autonomy. We just provide this opportunity to be within that landscape.
We use best practices to engage the kids that we work with. And so there's tons of opportunities within the week and daily to get outside into nature. And yeah, really experience what nature can offer and our connection with it, right? This broader understanding that the actions I take have an impact, and it'll circle back to me at some point.
Just to wrap it up and remind everyone, WyldFlower Learning Community has 3 roots. We focus on self-development, civic engagement, and environmental awareness. So we believe life is the curriculum, and it creates the perfect environment for learners to make meaningful connections between what they're learning through doing and the community in which they are growing. Learning, seeing through this lens as like the world is my classroom, gives context and value to the skills and the tasks and the concepts that students are engaging with. No one at WyldFlower ever asks, when will we use this in real life? Or will this information be on the test? They know that they're learning real life things for the purpose of living a real life. And we love our time together. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.